the ECHR is absolutely nothing more than a legal tool for lawyers to keep us in the hands of the Strasbourg court. We voted for Brexit, we voted to leave. It's a really simple situation. Many people thought that we were going to leave ECHR when we did vote for Brexit, and then obviously that hasn't happened and we're still in it. Right now, in my opinion, it's the biggest issue facing immigration and the reasons why we can't control our own borders. If we want to do that and we want to get tough on immigration, we have to come out of it because it absolutely undermines the security of our own country.
But Rebecca, we were in the ECHR long before we joined the European Union, or what was then the European Economic Community. There are lots of non-EU countries in the ECHR. It was part drafted by British politicians. It never used to be a problem when it came to migration. Is that not a fair point?
It didn't used to be a problem, but times move on and it's now outdated and it no longer is fit for purpose. So there are 47 member countries that are obviously part of it. You can't tell me that all of those 47 member countries have the exact same issues and they all face the exact same problems. Our problems are our problems, and this piece of legislation stops us in our process. We're a fantastic country. We're called Great Britain for a reason. We have the absolute ability to create a proper piece of legislation that helps our people, helps to control our borders, and it doesn't need to be done by a one blanket fits all policy.
OK, Ivon, I'm going to bring you in at this point. Do you want to come back to Rebecca and her point there, that we can just create our own legislation, create our own laws?
Well, I wonder if Rebecca's actually read the European Convention on Human Rights and she understands the actual articles which protect our rights. That's the first thing. It was drafted in the aftermath of the Second World War and the Holocaust to protect abuse by the state on its people. That's the purpose of the ECHR. It's not about migration. And the fundamental rights are not to what Rebecca objects to, but the right to life, the right not to have inhumane and degrading treatment, the right to get married, the right to have freedom of expression. These are all fundamental human rights that protects Rebecca, Tom, Ellie and me. That's what it's about. It's not about migration. And it guarantees the fundamental rights of individuals from abuse by the state. Now, if we don't have the ECHR, where do we go to? The last resort we have is European Court of Human Rights to oversee abuse of power by the state. So I don't think that people really understand what the ECHR is about. And without the protection of the Human Rights Act, which brings it into domestic legislation, the government would have the power to do whatever it wants. It could breach our rights, our fundamental rights. And lastly, it's part of the Good Friday Agreement. What does the government say about that? Because the Good Friday Agreement would have to be torn up because that's an integral part of that agreement.
No, Ivon, I think you make a very good point there in terms of how entangled the ECHR is with many different agreements that the United Kingdom has, many different international treaties, not least, of course, the Good Friday Agreement. But is there not a fair point that those who criticise the ECHR make, which is that these rights were drawn up with the best of intentions? They have now, to some extent, been over-interpreted by some lawyers and are used, instead of protecting the noble rights of life, liberty and perhaps the pursuit of happiness, if I'm not going to be too American about it all, but instead of being used, are being abused perhaps to stop the United Kingdom controlling its borders.
Well, you're talking about Article 8 is what you're talking about, and this is a thorn in the government side. The right to have family and private life, that's fundamental right. It doesn't matter whether you're a migrant or British national or anybody else. Everyone has a right to enjoy family and private life without unlawful interference by the state. And that needs to be protected. Look, a society is judged by the way that it treats and protects the most vulnerable people in its society. And the government go on and on about the will of the British people, the majority of British people. It's just simply not true. There is no data. They've put forward a poll which says that people want, for us to come out the European Convention. It's simply not true. And this attack on migrants is a distraction policy so that people don't look at the incompetence of this government in managing our migration and our borders. That is the fundamental problem, Tom.
Well, Rebecca, I want to bring you in at this point. Just come back to Ivon's point. He says the ECHR protects our fundamental human rights, and historically it has protected people from the state. That's important, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely it is. And I love the point of, have I actually read it? Yes, I did. When I qualified in law, I actually got a first class result in EU law. So I know a couple of bits about it, but not much. But yeah, absolutely. I don't actually know what you think is going to happen. So if we come out of ECHR, what do you think is now going to stop? We're going to stop same-sex marriages. Are we going to stop individual rights? Are we going to stop the rights of people having a private life? No, we're not. That's not going to happen, because we've well and truly moved forward. We're a great country. Our government are completely and utterly incapable. That is one thing that you've said that I completely and utterly agree with. Yes, they are. But this is not a detraction. This is stopping us from handling immigration. Nobody's talking about all the other points because they're just right. And that is exactly what will happen. If we create our own law here in the UK, it will still have all of those things, but it will still also help the problems that we are facing today, which ECHR does not afford us to do.